I didn't believe in coincidences, but there I was, standing at the edge of one of the most life-changing moments of my existence. Phoenix Remington, CEO, founder, innovator, untouchable. That's what I had told myself, what everyone had told me. For years, I built an empire, one that people would look at and envy, one that was sleek, cutting-edge, and powerful. But as the sound of my team clapping at another successful product launch faded into the background, there was one thing I couldn't control. Her. I had done everything in my power to bury her memory, to erase the ache of losing Ember Sinclair, the woman who had once been my everything, my greatest love, the one person who could make me forget about everything I thought I wanted. But I had abandoned her, left her behind when I made the selfish decision to prioritize my company over our future. I had buried that part of myself under deadlines, board meetings, and stock prices. But some things don't stay buried forever. The call came just as I was finishing a round of meetings with international investors, my mind already shifting to the next quarter, to the next project. A text lit up my phone screen, and I barely glanced at it before hitting ignore. I couldn't afford distractions right now. But then the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something about it sent a jolt of recognition through me. I swiped the screen and brought the phone to my ear, my mind racing through 1,000 possible reasons for the call. "Phoenix," said the voice I had thought I'd forgotten, the voice that still haunted my dreams. Ember, the word barely registered in my mind. It couldn't be her. She was just a chapter in a past that I had long since closed. But hearing her voice again, after all these years, felt like a punch to the gut. Ember. I said her name as if testing it on my tongue, unsure of what it even meant anymore. "Phoenix, I need you." Her voice trembled, fragile in a way I'd never imagined it could be. "It's Willow. She needs you, Willow." I froze. 1,000 thoughts collided in my mind. Who was Willow? I didn't know any Willow. But then her next words hit me like a freight train. "She's our daughter, Phoenix. Our daughter." The words hung in the air, as if time itself had stopped. My chest tightened, my heart racing in a way I hadn't felt in years. How could she be telling me this now, after all this time? How could I have a daughter I didn't know existed? I'd been so focused on the world I had built, the money, the power, the fame, and now I was hearing about a child I didn't even know I had. "You're not making sense," I said, my voice shaky. "I don't. How? Why didn't you tell me?" "I couldn't," Ember replied, her voice breaking. "I didn't know how. I couldn't bring her into your world, Phoenix. But now she needs you. She's sick. She needs blood, and only you can help her." I blinked, trying to process the words, the shock, blood, sickness. What was she saying? "Ember, what are you talking about?" I ran my hand through my hair, the room feeling like it was closing in on me. "What's going on?" "Willow has a rare blood type," Ember explained quickly, her voice frantic. "She's AB negative with the Duffy negative antigen. There's only a 2% chance anyone has it, but it's something you and she share. Phoenix, please, you're the only one who can save her. She's at Portland Children's Hospital. If you don't come, she won't make it." I felt the air rush out of my lungs. I stood still, my mind completely blank. I hadn't felt anything like this in years, like a door had opened to a life I'd never known. And it was a life I had no idea how to navigate. "Tell me where to go," I said finally, my voice barely more than a whisper. "I'll be there, just don't let anything happen to her." The line went quiet for a moment, then Ember's voice cracked through. "Portland Children's, Phoenix, please hurry." I didn't wait for another word. I hung up the phone, feeling like I had been ripped from everything that had once been stable, everything that had defined me. My empire, it was meaningless. The meetings, irrelevant. All the deals and projects I had meticulously planned and executed were nothing compared to the reality of what I was about to face. I was about to meet my daughter, a daughter I didn't know existed, and I had no idea if I was even the man capable of being the father she needed. The drive to the private airfield was a blur. I didn't register the passing city streets, the blur of lights, or the hum of the car's engine beneath me. Everything in my mind was focused on one thing: Portland. It felt like the longest drive of my life, yet somehow I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been running toward this moment for years. I had thought I was invincible. I thought I had mastered the art of control, of navigating every obstacle with ease. I had made all the right moves, built a legacy that would be remembered for decades. But now, here I was, running toward a hospital to meet a child I had ignored, a woman I had abandoned, and a life I didn't even know I had. I stepped into the jet as quickly as I could, instructing the pilot to take off immediately. My mind was spinning, the weight of Ember's words pressing down on me. Our daughter, I had no idea what kind of man I was anymore. I didn't know if I was even capable of being the father she needed. I didn't know if Ember could ever forgive me for abandoning them both. But I knew one thing: whatever had to happen next, I couldn't run from it. Not anymore. As the plane ascended, I looked out the window, watching the lights of the city fade below me. The vastness of the world suddenly felt so insignificant. And as I looked ahead, my heart beat faster, not from the thrill of business or success, but from the anxiety of facing a new reality. A reality where I was no longer the CEO. I was just a man, a father, and that terrified me more than any corporate takeover ever had. The jet ride to Portland felt like an eternity. Every minute that passed only deepened the weight in my chest. I wasn't sure if it was the anxiety of the situation, the thought of meeting Willow for the first time, or the guilt that crushed me at the realization of all I had missed in her life. Portland's skyline finally came into view, a stark contrast to the concrete jungle I'd spent most of my life in. I hadn't expected the city to feel so different. It wasn't glamorous or bustling like Manhattan, but there was something quietly powerful about it. Maybe it was the fact that I was here for a reason I couldn't ignore anymore. The plane landed smoothly, but as soon as I stepped out onto the tarmac, a chill ran through me. I had no idea what to expect. Everything was so uncertain. Health, Ember's feelings toward me, the possibility that I might never fully make up for my absence. The world I had controlled for so long felt like it was slipping from my grasp. I was met by a driver who didn't speak much, just nodded at me and opened the door to a black SUV. I slipped inside, feeling like a ghost in my own life. The streets of Portland passed by, each one unfamiliar, yet strangely comforting. The city wasn't trying to impress anyone. It was simple, honest. Maybe that's why Ember had come here. Built a life in a place where she could quietly exist, away from the noise I had created around myself. As we neared the hospital, my mind replayed everything Ember had said. Willow is ours, my daughter. The words haunted me. I hadn't known she existed until an hour ago, and yet here I was, rushing to her side, hoping to be the father she needed, even though I had no clue what that meant. The past wounds revealed. The years I had spent climbing the ladder of success, ignoring the woman who had once meant everything to me, had come back to bite me in ways I couldn't have foreseen. Ember had carried this burden alone for years, raising Willow without me. As I thought about it, I felt the bitterness of the truth seep into my veins. All the meetings, the late nights, the endless hours spent focusing on expansion and profit, none of it had brought me any real peace. It hadn't made me happy, but this, right here, was the reality I had avoided. A reality where my family was a stranger to me. A reality that, despite all my efforts, I couldn't outrun. The SUV pulled into the hospital parking lot, and the world outside suddenly seemed distant. My feet felt heavy as I walked through the automatic sliding doors, and as soon as I stepped inside, the sterile smell of disinfectant hit me. The hustle and bustle of the hospital staff around me felt like a blur, but I knew exactly where I needed to be. "Mr. Remington," a nurse called out, catching my attention as I walked past the nurse's station. I nodded, my mouth dry. "Willow, follow me." She turned on her heel and led me down a long corridor. The fluorescent lights above hummed softly, casting a faint glow on the white walls. I couldn't help but feel like I was walking through a different world. This was a place where nothing mattered except life and death, where nothing else existed but the fragility of human existence. I had never been in a hospital like this before. All the places I had been to in my life, boardrooms, business trips, galas, none of them seemed important now. None of them mattered. We stopped in front of a room. The nurse pushed open the door, and I stepped inside. Willow was lying in a bed, surrounded by machines, a faint beep of the heart monitor filling the air. She was so small, so fragile. My stomach twisted. How could I have missed this? How could I have been so blind to the fact that I had a daughter, and now she was fighting for her life? Ember was standing next to the bed, her hand resting gently on Willow's small one. She looked up when I entered, her face a mixture of exhaustion and determination. But there was something else there, too, something I couldn't place. Maybe it was the weight of everything we had been through, or maybe it was the uncertainty of everything that was happening now. "Phoenix," she said quietly, her voice raw, "I didn't want you to see her like this." I could feel the walls Ember had built around herself over the years. I had no right to be angry at her for shutting me out. I had done it first. But seeing her like this, seeing her strong for Willow, I couldn't help but admire her in a way I never had before. I took a step closer to the bed, looking at Willow. My heart clenched as I realized that this small, beautiful girl was mine, and I had missed everything. "I'm sorry," I whispered, barely able to get the words out. I had no idea. I didn't know. Ember didn't answer right away. She didn't need to. There was nothing to say. I had made my choices. I had chosen work, ambition, success over everything else. And now I was faced with the consequences of those choices. The antagonist faintly revealed. This wasn't just about saving Willow anymore. It was about something deeper about me, confronting the life I had built and the man I had become. I had to face the fact that I had walked away from everything that truly mattered. There were no quick fixes here. No business meetings to close. No contracts to sign that would make everything right. This was real. This was life and death. And for the first time, I wasn't in control. I stood there, feeling powerless. As Ember continued to hold Willow's hand, my daughter, I didn't know how to approach her, didn't know how to make up for the years I had missed. But one thing was clear. I wasn't leaving without doing everything I could for her. The doctor entered the room, and I turned to listen, my mind still reeling. They would start the blood transfusion soon. My blood, the rare type that only a few people in the world carried. I was the only one who could save her. Mr. Remington, the doctor said, his voice professional but with an undercurrent of urgency. We've matched the blood. We'll begin the transfusion shortly. If everything goes well, Willow should begin to stabilize. I nodded, unable to find words. I glanced at Ember, and for the first time, she looked at me with something resembling trust in her eyes. But it wasn't just trust I needed to earn. It was forgiveness. And I didn't know if I could earn that. Not now, not after all this time. I took a deep breath. The weight of everything hung in the air between us. Ember, me, Willow, our past, our present, and whatever future might come from this. I wasn't sure where we went from here. But one thing was for certain. I was going to fight for Willow. I was going to fight for the family I never knew I had, even if it cost me everything I had built. I stayed by Willow's side for the next few hours, watching her small body slowly begin to stabilize as the blood transfusion began. The machines beeped rhythmically, and the tension in the room felt suffocating. Each time I looked at Ember, I saw a woman hardened by years of struggle, but still somehow gentle and caring as she sat next to Willow, her hand never leaving the child's. The woman who had once been the love of my life, now distant, almost foreign to me. The silence between us was thick with unspoken words. I wanted to break it, to ask her how she had gotten here, how she had built this life on her own, but I didn't know where to begin. I didn't know if I had the right to ask. My life had been consumed by my ambition, and Ember had carried the burden of raising our daughter all alone. I couldn't pretend that everything could just go back to normal after all this time. After a while, the nurse entered the room to check Willow's vitals, and I took the opportunity to step outside into the hallway. The air felt cold against my skin, the sterile antiseptic smell of the hospital clinging to everything. I needed a moment to process what was happening. My mind was spinning, trying to understand how everything had unraveled so quickly. The reality of being a father hit me harder than I had expected. I had always imagined that when the time came, I would be ready, that I would have the perfect answer to every question. But there were no instructions, no guidebook on how to be the father to a daughter you had never known existed. The responsibility weighed heavily on me, and even though I was here, doing what I could to save her, I couldn't help but feel like an outsider in my own family. I glanced at my phone. Dozens of missed calls, text messages, and emails from the company. Investors wanted updates on the latest quarter, and Graham Klein, the head of my board, had sent a string of increasingly urgent messages, but none of that mattered right now. Willow needed me. Ember needed me. And the only thing that mattered was the life in that hospital bed. The connection with Willow was unlike anything I had experienced before. Watching her little chest rise and fall with each breath, I realized something. She was mine. She shared my blood, my genes. But I had missed 8 years of her life. Every milestone, every word, every little thing that made her who she was had passed me by. And now, here I was, trying to make up for it. I leaned against the wall outside the room, running my hands through my hair. The weight of everything felt suffocating. I had worked my entire life to build something meaningful, but at that moment, it felt like none of it mattered. Phoenix. The voice cut through the quiet, pulling me out of my thoughts. I turned to see Ember standing at the end of the hallway, her arms crossed over her chest, her expression unreadable. She was still wearing the same clothes she had when I arrived, her face a little pale, but determined. It was like nothing had changed, yet everything had. "Can we talk?" she asked, her tone more neutral than I had expected. I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. "Yeah, we should." We walked together down the hallway, neither of us speaking for a few moments. The tension between us was palpable, like a fragile thread holding us together. I had no idea what to say to her. What could I say? There was so much between us, so much time wasted, so many things left unsaid. When we reached a small, empty waiting room, she turned to face me. Her eyes, once so full of warmth and love, now looked weary, guarded. "You know, I didn't want to call you," Ember said quietly, almost as if speaking to herself. "I didn't want you to be involved. I didn't want you to have any part of this. But Willow needed you, and I couldn't let her die without giving her a chance." I felt a stab of guilt pierce my chest. The words hit harder than I expected. Willow needed you. It was a reminder that I had failed as a father, and now I had to face the consequences of that failure. "I didn't know, Ember. You have to understand. I didn't know," I said, my voice tight with emotion. "I didn't know she existed, and I didn't know what I was missing until I saw her. But I'm here now. I want to make it right. I want to be here for her, for both of you." Ember didn't say anything right away. She just looked at me, her gaze sharp but filled with a quiet sadness. I could see the walls she had built around herself, walls that had been reinforced by years of dealing with everything on her own. I had never realized how strong she was until now. I had never seen the depth of her resilience, of how much she had carried alone while I was too busy with my own world. "You think you can just come back, Phoenix?" Ember's voice broke through my thoughts, her words like a slap. "You think you can just waltz in here after all these years and pretend like everything's fine? Like everything you did can be erased just because you showed up with a blood bag?" Her words stung, but they were the truth. I hadn't been there for her. I hadn't been there for Willow. And now Ember was angry, and I deserved every bit of that anger. "No, I don't think I can just make it all go away," I said quietly, my hands clenched at my sides. "But I'm not going anywhere. I'm here now, and I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. I can't undo the past, but I can help you with the future. With Willow, I can be a father. I can be the man you need me to be, even if I don't know how yet." Ember's eyes softened slightly, but I could see the doubt still clouding her expression. She wasn't ready to forgive me, and I couldn't blame her for that. "I don't know if I believe you," she said softly. "I don't know if I can trust you, but Willow needs you. She deserves to know her father, and you need to show up for her, Phoenix. Not just today, but every day. I can't do this alone anymore." I felt a lump form in my throat. Every day. I had never thought about what it meant to be a parent on that level before. It wasn't just about saving her life today. It was about being there for her, through everything, through the struggles, the victories, the quiet moments, and the loud ones. It was about being consistent. And that was something I had never done. "I won't let you down again," I said, the words feeling like a promise that was long overdue. Ember didn't respond right away. She just nodded, as if acknowledging the weight of what I had just said. There was a long silence before she spoke again, her voice quieter this time. "Willow is going to need more than just a father, Phoenix," she said, her eyes searching mine. "She's going to need a family. and I don't know if I'm ready to let you back into ours. But I will for her. If you're serious about being a father, then you'll have to prove it." I stood there, the weight of her words settling in my chest. I wasn't sure how I would prove it, but I knew one thing for sure: wasn't walking away. I had lost too much already. I woke up to the cold hum of the hospital at 5:30 a.m., the low buzz of fluorescent lights flickering above me. The exhaustion from the past 24 hours had caught up with me, but sleep didn't come easy. Instead, my mind was racing. Every moment since Ember's call felt like a blurry motion's decisions, regrets all crashing into one another. Willow was stable for now. The transfusion had worked, and the doctors seemed optimistic. But optimism didn't quiet the storm raging inside me. I had come here to fix one thing, to save one life, but everything had changed. Ember, Willow, and Iwi were all tangled up in something that had been set in motion long before. I had walked through these doors, but even now, standing in the sterile, quiet hallways of this hospital, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in the back of my mind. The thing that was pulling at me something bigger than just making up for lost time with my daughter. It was the realization that I couldn't just walk in and fix this. The damage I'd done wasn't a problem that could be solved with a check, a plane ticket, or some well-meaning words. The years I had missed those were gone, never to be regained. The truth was staring me in the face. Ember hadn't invited me here because she thought I could come in and save the day. No, she had invited me because, in her eyes, I was a part of the problem, one she never asked for, but one that still lingered in the shadows of her life. And if I was going to make a difference in Willow's life, I was going to have to prove it in a way I had never been asked to prove before. I left the hospital room just before 6 a.m. The morning was still dark, but the sky was beginning to brighten. I needed aerial air away from the sterile walls of the hospital. As I walked down the quiet street, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was from Graham Klein, my board chair back in New York. I'd been avoiding him since I left for Portland. He had been relentless, sending text after text, pushing for updates on the quarterly earnings, and demanding answers about my sudden departure. But I wasn't ready to deal with any of that. I pulled the phone out, saw the string of messages. His words were sharp and urgent, but it was the last one that made my heart sink. "I hope you're ready to address this situation with your absence. There are rumors of a possible merger with Devo Technologies. If you're not back in New York by Friday, we'll be moving forward without you." I couldn't believe it. A merger. This wasn't just about missing the next meeting. This was about my position on the board, my role as CEO, and the foundation of the company I'd built. I walked faster, the cold air biting into my skin, but it couldn't drown out the weight of the decision hanging in front of me. I had a responsibility to my company, yes, but now I had a daughter to think about. A daughter who had no idea who I was, who had never had a father, who had never had a family. My phone buzzed again, and I didn't have to look at the screen to know it was Graham again. I turned the phone off and shoved it into my pocket. I didn't need distractions right now. I needed to focus. When I returned to the hospital, Ember was sitting in the waiting area outside Willow's room, her head down as she scribbled something in a notebook. She looked tired, worn out, but still holding herself together in a way that reminded me of the woman I used to know, the woman I had left behind. "You're up early," I said, my voice a little gruffer than I intended. She didn't look up immediately, but when she did, her eyes were tired but sharp. "You don't have to be here, Phoenix. You've done your part. You saved her life. That's all I ever asked of you." The words stung, but they were true. In Ember's eyes, I had already given my contribution. I had shown up, I had provided the blood, I had done the bare minimum, but it wasn't enough. Not for me. I pulled up a chair beside her, sitting down quietly. I wasn't here to argue or defend myself. I was here to figure out what came next. "Willow is going to be okay," I said after a long pause, watching her reaction. "The doctors are confident she's out of immediate danger." She nodded, her lips pressed into a tight line. "She'll be fine, but that's not the point, Phoenix." Her voice dropped, barely above a whisper. "You think just because you're here now, everything's going to be easy. You think this is enough. I never said it would be easy." My voice was low, but steady. I wasn't backing down. "I know I've missed a lot, Ember. I can't change that, but I'm not walking away again. I won't let her grow up without me. Not again." Her eyes softened for just a moment before the walls came back up. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't just about showing up when you feel like it. Willow's not some project you can fix by throwing money or blood at it. She needs consistency. She needs to know that her father isn't going to disappear when things get hard." "I'm not disappearing," I replied, my voice firm. "I'm here now, and I'm staying. For her. For you." Her eyes flickered briefly to the floor, then back to me. "You can't just say that, Phoenix. You have to show me. You have to show Willow. She's not something you can fix with a few good intentions." The weight of her words settled between us. I realized then that Ember wasn't just angry at me for abandoning them. She was angry because she had learned to survive without me. And now, I was asking her to trust me again, to trust that I could be the man I had failed to be for so long. I wasn't sure how to prove myself to her, but I knew this: I wasn't going to leave this time. Not without doing everything I could to make up for the years I had lost. "I can't change the past," I said quietly, leaning forward in the chair. "But I can be here now. For both of you. I don't expect it to be easy, Ember, but I'm willing to fight for her. Fight for us. Whatever it takes." She didn't respond right away, but I saw the tiniest flicker of something in her eyes, something I hadn't seen in a long time. I knew it wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a crack in the wall she'd built around herself. A crack I was willing to try and break down. My phone buzzed again, this time from the board, but I ignored it. Graham's message from earlier felt like an anchor, pulling me back to a world that didn't matter right now. I had to make a choice. Will I continue down the path of ambition, where success is measured in dollars and deals, or do I stay here and fight for the life I've never known? Ember's voice broke through my thoughts, her words blunt and to the point. "Don't make promises you can't keep, Phoenix. Willow needs more than just a father. She needs someone who will be there for her." Every day, I sat back, my mind 1,000 miles away as I tried to reconcile the man I had been with, the man I needed to become. There was no turning back now. The life I had built had to make room for Willow, for Ember, for a future that I had just barely begun to understand. The days in Portland began to blur together as I settled into a strange new routine. My mind was still spinning from everything that had happened, from the shock of learning about Willow, to the rush of getting here and doing what I could to save her, to now trying to figure out how to fit into a life I had never been a part of. Willow was getting stronger, but the real work was just beginning. Every day, I sat by her side, talking to her, though I knew she couldn't hear me yet. Ember, of course, was always there too, her gaze never leaving our daughter. I saw the subtle changes in her demeanor as she adjusted to having me around. She didn't trust me, not yet, anyway. I couldn't blame her. The damage I had caused was too deep for quick fixes. I didn't blame her for keeping her distance. But I did know the sigh couldn't undo the past, but I was going to fight for the future. Willow's future, Ember's future. It wasn't just about saving Willow. I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was something else going on, something I was missing. And it wasn't just Ember's coldness toward me. There were bigger forces at play, and I wasn't entirely sure what they were yet. I spent hours each day on the phone with my team in New York. They were scrambling to deal with the aftermath of my sudden disappearance. The quarterly earnings report was coming up, and Graham Klein, the chairman of the board, wasn't happy. He'd been sending me texts and emails, each one more frantic than the last, demanding updates on everything from merger talks to investor relations. But I couldn't focus on any of it. Not right now. Instead, I dove into research. I started looking into Willow's condition, AB negative with Duffy negative antigen. It wasn't just a rare blood type. It was nearly impossible to find matches. There were only a few donors in the world who could provide it. And even though I had a rare blood type, I wasn't the only one. I needed to know everything about this blood disorder and what kind of medical resources were available for Willow. That's when I stumbled across something odd. As I researched hospitals and medical records related to her condition, I found references to Devo Technologies, a leading medical tech company in Portland. They had been involved in cutting-edge research for rare blood conditions. I didn't think much of it at first, till I found out that Ember had worked with them in the past. The more I dug, the more questions popped up. Something wasn't adding up. I was sitting at a cafe just outside the hospital one evening when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, half expecting it to be another message from Graham, but instead it was from Ember. Meet me at the hospital in 30 minutes. We need to talk. I didn't know what was going on, but something in my gut told me it wasn't good. I met her in the lobby, where she was waiting for me, her arms crossed tightly. Her eyes were hard, the walls around her as high as I'd ever seen them. I couldn't read her face, but I could tell she was holding something back. "Phoenix," she began, her voice cold and controlled. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you earlier." I swallowed. "What's going on, Ember?" Her eyes flickered with something, pain maybe, or frustration, but she quickly looked away. "It's about Willow, and it's about Devo Technologies." I blinked, confused. What does Devo have to do with Willow's condition? Ember paused for a long moment before answering. "It's complicated. Devo Technologies has been involved in a lot of the treatments Willow has received. But there's more to it than just medical research. They've been funding a project on rare blood types for years, Phoenix, and one of the key players in that project is none other than my father." I froze. Ember's father. I had known he was a prominent figure in the Portland tech scene, but I hadn't known he was connected to Devo, your father. I asked, my voice barely a whisper, "What does that have to do with Willow?" "I didn't want you to know," Ember said, her voice low and tight. "But my father, he's been manipulating things behind the scenes. Willow's condition, her treatment, even her blood type, he's been funding the research all along." I felt the ground beneath me shift. "You're telling me that your father has been controlling her treatment all this time? That's why you've kept her away from me?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I didn't know, Phoenix," Ember said, her voice shaking with a mixture of anger and hurt. I had no idea what he was doing until recently. And now, with Willow's blood being so rare, it's all connected. I'm scared. I'm scared of what my father might do next. I could feel my stomach twist as I processed the revelation. Devo Technologies, my business rivals in the medical field, were involved with Willow's health. And now, Ember's father, someone I had never once considered a factor in all of this, was tied to it. But that wasn't the worst part. Phoenix, Ember continued, her voice trembling slightly. I think my father is using Willow's condition as leverage. He's involved in some deal with Devo, and I'm afraid that if we don't play by his rules, he'll use Willow as a pawn. If he finds out we're seeking outside treatment, or that you're involved, he might pull the funding. Everything could fall apart. I clenched my fists. This was bigger than just saving Willow's life. This was about power, control, manipulation. And now I was right in the middle of it. I looked at Ember, my mind racing. We need to find out exactly what your father is doing. We need to make sure Willow's treatment doesn't get interrupted. I don't know if we can stop him, Ember said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I have to try. I can't let him use my daughter like this. I knew she was right. This wasn't just about being a father. It was about protecting my daughter from forces I couldn't even begin to understand. And if I had any hope of doing that, I had to step into a world I had avoided for too long. The days blurred into one another after Ember's revelation. The weight of what she had told me, the depth of her father's involvement with Devo Technologies, the power he held over Willow's treatment, and the leverage he could use against Us was too much to absorb in one sitting. Yet every moment, every passing second, I felt myself spiraling deeper into the web of lies, power plays, and family secrets that were now pulling me in different directions. I was no longer just the CEO of Remington Technologies. That part of me felt like a distant memory, like something I used to be. Now, I was a man faced with a harsh reality. I was responsible for this little girl I had never known, and I had to protect her from forces far beyond my control. It was late one night when Ember and I finally faced each other in the hospital cafeteria. The room dimly lit and almost empty. Willow had been sleeping for hours, her vitals stable but still fragile. Ember hadn't left her side since the transfusion, and I respected that. I had to give her space to process everything I had just discovered. Everything I had been blind to for so long. Phoenix, Ember said, her voice tight as she stirred her coffee absent-mindedly. I don't know how much longer we can keep this up. We're walking on a knife's edge. I don't trust my father. I don't trust anyone in that world. Her eyes were darker now, not just from lack of sleep, but from the weight of the realization that her father, the man who should have been the rock in her life, was the very person who could destroy it all. She had raised Willow alone for so many years, and now, the people who had power over her daughter's life were people she never thought she would have to fight. I don't either, I said, leaning forward. My voice was low, controlled, but the storm inside me was anything but calm. But we have to fight. I can't do this without you, Ember. I won't let anyone use her as a pawn. She met my gaze, the hard edge in her eyes slowly softening, just for a moment. You're not the only one who feels responsible for her, Phoenix, she said quietly. I never wanted this life for her. I wanted Willow to grow up without the weight of all this crap, without the manipulation. I didn't know what to say. I had failed them both, and no apology could ever erase the years I had missed. But as much as it hurt to face the truth, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to leave them this time. Not after everything that had happened. A few hours later, I found myself in a small hospital chapel, my hands clasped in front of me, my eyes closed, but my mind racing. I had no idea how to do this, how to fight a battle that was so much bigger than me. I was used to being in control, used to calling the shots. But right now, I felt completely powerless. Why didn't I see it? I whispered to myself, the weight of the question hanging heavily in the quiet space. How could I have been so blind? I thought about the company, the empire I had spent so long building. I thought about the sacrifices I had made, those moments when I could have been there for Ember, for Willow-Ann chose to be elsewhere, the phone calls I ignored, the texts I didn't reply to, the meetings I prioritized over the most important relationship in my life. I thought about Ember, how much she had changed, how much I had changed. There was so much history between us, so many things unsaid. How could I have walked away from someone like her? How could I have thought success was enough? And then there was Willow. I didn't even know this little girl. I didn't know her laugh, her quirks, her favorite color. I had missed her first steps, her first words. I had missed everything. A soft knock on the chapel door broke my thoughts. I looked up to see Ember standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. She had her arms crossed, but there was a vulnerability in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. "Phoenix," she said, her voice tentative. "I need to talk to you." I stood up and motioned for her to come in, my chest tight. I could feel the weight of the unspoken things between us, the unspoken question hanging in the air. Can we move forward? Ember sat down beside me, her hands shaking as she clasped them together in her lap. There was a long silence before she spoke again. "You were right," she said, her voice low. "I didn't want to let you in. I didn't want to need you. I thought I could handle it all on my own. But now I realize I can't do this without you. And I'm scared. I'm scared of what my father will do. I'm scared of what he'll do to us." I felt a sharp pain in my chest at her words. I had never seen Ember like this. She was always the strong one, the one who carried everything on her shoulders. But now she was just as vulnerable as I felt. "Ember," I began, but she held up a hand, stopping me. "No," she said softly, her eyes not meeting mine. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'm not even sure I can forgive you for everything, but I can't do this without you. I need you to be here. Not for me, for Willow. We can't fight this alone." I felt the weight of her words sink into my chest. The guilt, the frustration, the pain, all of it came flooding back. I had let her down. I had let them both down. But this time, I wasn't going anywhere. "I'm here, Ember," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not going anywhere. I will fight for Willow. I will fight for you. And I will make sure your father can't do this anymore." She finally met my gaze, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. It wasn't much, but it was something. We sat there in silence for a long time. Outside the small chapel window, the early morning light was breaking through, casting long shadows on the floor. It was a new day, but the weight of everything still hung over us. I knew that the battle ahead wouldn't be easy. Ember's father wasn't going to back down. He was ruthless, calculating, and he had all the power. But now I wasn't just fighting for a company or a deal, I was fighting for my daughter, for Ember, for the family I should have been part of all along. The reality was that this was going to cost me. I didn't know if it would cost me my company, my reputation, or more, but I was willing to pay the price. "I'll do whatever it takes," I said, my voice firm, unwavering. "I won't let them take Willow. I won't let your father control her life. Not now, not ever." Ember didn't respond right away, but when she did, her voice was barely a whisper. "Then let's make sure they never win." The morning of the confrontation was colder than I expected. Portland's mist hung in the air like a veil, softening the sharp edges of the city as I stepped out of the hospital. I had spent the past week entrenched in strategy talking to lawyers, working with Ember to get her father's involvement in Willow's treatment confirmed, and preparing for a battle that I knew would define everything. Ember's father, Victor Sinclair, was a force I had always known about, but had never fully acknowledged. A ruthless businessman who had built his fortune by playing with people's lives, pulling strings behind the scenes. His influence stretched across industries, and he wasn't the type to be challenged lightly. I had underestimated him, and in doing so, I had underestimated the lengths he would go to keep control. The night before, Ember and I had finalized our plan. We were going to confront Victor, not in the boardrooms or the conference calls where he thrived, but in the one place he couldn't control the truth. The truth about his manipulation, his involvement in Willow's health, and the dark secrets he had kept hidden for years. Ember's anger was palpable, but there was something else beneath it. Fear of what he would do when he realized his grip on their lives was slipping. I couldn't let him win. Not again. We agreed that the best course of action was to take him head-on, in a place where he couldn't manipulate the narrative. We were going to meet him in person, face to face, and force him to acknowledge the mess he had created. It was late afternoon when we arrived at Sinclair Technologies, the massive building that stood tall in the center of Portland. The glass walls reflected the sky, its sleek, modern design representing everything Victor stood for: power, prestige, control. I could almost feel him watching from behind those walls. Knowing we were coming, Ember walked beside me, her steps steady, but her jaw clenched with the same determination I had seen in her over the past few days. She was no longer the woman who had kept her distance from me, the woman who had built walls I couldn't break through. She was fighting for Willow. "For us, I can't promise it'll go the way we want," she said quietly, her eyes on the door in front of us. "But we're doing this for her. We have to stop him." "I know," I said, my voice firm. "We're not letting him take her life again." We entered the building and were immediately escorted up to Victor's office. The elevator ride felt like a lifetime. The walls were glass, giving us a clear view of the city. But the closer we got to the top floor, the more I felt like I was stepping into a trap. Victor had always been one step ahead. He'd been watching us, plotting how to keep everything under his control. And now we were going to break that control. When we reached the top floor, the doors opened to a grand open-plan office, surrounded by walls of glass. In the middle of the room stood Victor Sinclair. His back was to us, but I could feel the tension in the air, the weight of his presence even before he turned around. He was tall, sharp-featured, and impeccably dressed. There was no softness in his gaze, no warmth in his voice. Just cold, calculated precision. "So Ember," he said, his voice low and smooth, "I see you've finally decided to show up. And I assume this," he gestured to me, "is your little backup." I stepped forward, my jaw tight, not letting his words rattle me. This isn't about me, Victor. It's about her. About Willow. What you've done to her, to Ember, it's not going to stand. Victor's eyes flicked to me, a cold glint in them. I see you've found your spine, Phoenix. But you don't understand how this world works. You think you can just walk in and make demands. You're in over your head. Ember stepped forward, her eyes burning with anger. You've been controlling everything behind the scenes, using Willow to get what you want. She's not your pawn, Victor. She's a child, and you've twisted her life for your gain. Victor smiled, a slow, almost cruel smile. You think I did this for gain? This is about survival, Ember. This is about keeping our family's legacy intact. You wouldn't understand. I understand perfectly, she shot back, her voice steady but fierce. And I'm done with you using her. This ends now. I watched as Victor's smile faded. He knew his control was slipping. He had always counted on Ember's reluctance to face him, to face the reality of what he had done. But now, Ember was done being afraid. I wasn't going to waste time with words anymore. This wasn't about negotiation. This wasn't about trying to reason with a man who had spent his life manipulating everyone around him. This was about exposing him, and stopping him from tearing apart what we had left. I know everything, I said, my voice cold and unwavering. You've been pulling strings with Devo Technologies, using Willow's blood condition as leverage. You've been funding research and playing God with people's lives, and now you're trying to use her against us. You're not going to get away with it. Victor's face hardened, and for a moment I thought I saw something shift in his eyes. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by the mask of the man who had built an empire on the backs of others. You don't know anything, Phoenix, Victor spat, his voice rising for the first time. You think you can walk in here and take everything I've built. You think you can come into my world and take back control. You're nothing but a mistake waiting to happen. You'll ruin everything you've built just to try and fix a problem you created. He was trying to throw me off balance, but it wasn't working. You're the one who created the problem. Victor, Ember said, her voice calm but firm. You manipulated everything. You used Willow's blood condition to control her, to control me. And now you're going to answer for it. For a moment, it seemed like Victor was going to say something more, but he stopped himself. I could see his mind racing, calculating the next move. The next step. He was cornered. There was nowhere for him to go now. I don't know what you think you're going to do, he finally said, his voice cold, but this isn't over. You think you've won? You've made a huge mistake. I stepped forward, my voice strong, unwavering. It's over, Victor. This ends now. Victor didn't say another word. He just turned and walked toward the far wall of his office, punching a button on the intercom. Security, he said, his tone flat. Escort them out. I stood my ground, watching him, waiting. He was trying to call my bluff, but I wasn't going to back down. Not now, not ever. Ember and I exchanged a glance. This wasn't the end of the fight, but it was the first victory we'd had. We had exposed him. We had broken his hold on us. We had made sure that Willow would have a future free from his manipulation. As we walked out of Victor's office, Ember's hand brushed against mine. It was small, but it felt like the first step toward something I never thought I'd have again. Trust, we did it. She said quietly. I nodded. We're not done yet, but it's a start. Outside the building, The cool Portland air hit me like a slap, but it was a welcome change. The fight wasn't over, but we had taken the first step, and I would continue to fight for Ember, for Willow, for everything that mattered. I had no idea what the future held, but I knew one thing: I wasn't backing down. Not now, not ever. The days after our confrontation with Victor Sinclair were a blur of legal paperwork, hospital visits, and meetings. Ember and I had made a dent in his empire, but we both knew this was far from over. Victor was a man who wouldn't go down easy, and though he had lost his hold over Willow's treatment, he still had power that reached deep into the corridors of the business world and beyond. I spent my days in Portland, splitting my time between the hospital and the legal teams we had set up to handle the fallout. The board in New York had been relentless, pushing for me to return and handle the company, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. Not yet. There was something far more important than numbers, quarterly reports, and deals to be made. It was Willow, and it was Ember. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of what truly mattered. And it wasn't the empire I'd built. It wasn't the applause at corporate events or the lavish offices. It was the quiet moments I spent with Willow, watching her get stronger every day. And the conversations I had with Ember, slowly rebuilding what we had once lost. The change between Ember and I was slow. It had to be. We couldn't just erase the years of silence, the hurt, the distance that had grown between us. But with every day that passed, there was progress. Small steps, a touch on the arm, a glance that didn't look away, a conversation that didn't end in argument. One evening, after the doctors had cleared Willow for the night, Ember and I found ourselves sitting in the small cafeteria, just the two of us. I had never imagined that this would be how we'd reconnect over coffee in a hospital break room, but here we were. I never thought I'd be here. "Phoenix," Ember said, her voice quieter than usual, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "I never thought I'd need you, but I do. And I hate that it took Willow being sick for me to finally admit that." I looked at her, her tired eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in years. Vulnerability. I hate it too. I hate that I missed all of this. But I'm here now, Ember, and I'm not going anywhere. She didn't say anything at first, but after a long pause, she finally met my gaze. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you for everything, Phoenix. I'm still angry at you, but I don't know if I want to keep holding on to that anger. I don't know if it's helping Willow." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I don't need you to forgive me right now. I just need you to know that I'm trying. For you. For Willow." We sat there in silence for a while, both lost in our thoughts. For once, the quiet felt right. Willow's recovery wasn't an instant fix, and there were still long nights, hospital visits, and tests to be done, but I saw progress. The color slowly returned to her face, her appetite grew, and the once muted laughter that echoed in the hospital room finally began to surface. Every morning. I woke up early to spend time with her. I wanted to be there for the moments I had missed. I wanted to be part of her life, even if I was starting from scratch. And with Ember by my side, though we still had our work to do, there was hope. We weren't where we used to be, but maybe we could get there again. The day after the confrontation with Victor Sinclair, I received a call from my lawyer in New York. The board had decided to hold an emergency meeting to discuss my future with the company. The merger with Devo Technologies was still on the table, and despite the personal crisis I was in, the company couldn't afford to let things slide. I hadn't planned on returning to New York just yet, but I knew the time had come. The choice before me was clear. Go back to New York, take control of Remington Technologies, and reclaim the empire I had spent my life building, or stay here with Willow and Ember and build something new. Something that actually mattered. The phone call ended, but the weight of that decision felt heavier than ever before. I looked over at Ember, who was sitting on the edge of Willow's bed, reading a book to her in the soft light of the afternoon. The scene was simple, but for me, it was everything. I had missed so much. I had failed them both, but now I had the chance to make things right. I wasn't just a CEO anymore. I was a father, and maybe, just maybe, I could be the man Ember needed me to be. I knew I couldn't stay in Portland forever. The reality of running a company like Remington Technologies meant sacrifices. There were deals to be made, decisions to be finalized. But when I looked at Willow, my daughter, I knew that I couldn't go back to the man I was before. I couldn't let ambition be the thing that defined me anymore. Ember, I said softly, walking over to her. I have to make a choice. She looked up at me, her eyes tired but focused. What do you mean? I can go back to New York. I can fix the mess I've made at the company, reclaim the empire I built. But I'll be gone for months, maybe longer. Or I can stay here, with you, with Willow, and I'll fight for the life I've missed. Her gaze softened, and for the first time in a long time, I saw the same woman I had fallen in love with years ago. The woman who had fought for everything, even when it seemed impossible. You don't have to choose, Phoenix, she said, her voice steady. But I can't do this again. I can't let you go back to that life. Willow needs you here, and maybe, just maybe, I do too. I took a deep breath, my heart racing. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't leave them. I couldn't abandon them again, not after everything. I'll stay, I said, my voice firm. I'm not going anywhere. Not again. The days after that decision were some of the hardest I had ever faced. There were still calls from New York, still emails from the board demanding answers. But I was here now. I had a new responsibility, a new life to build, and I wasn't going to walk away from it. Willow's health continued to improve, and with every day that passed, I saw the bond growing between the three of us. Ember, though cautious, was starting to let me back in, piece by piece. There were still moments of doubt. There were still fears that maybe it was too late, that I couldn't undo the years I had lost. But each moment I spent with them, each laugh we shared, each new step Willow took reminded me that family wasn't something you could take for granted. It was something you had to fight for every single day. One evening, as I sat on the couch with Ember, watching Willow play on the floor with a toy, I realized something. The world wasn't going to wait for me to figure everything out. There would always be demands, there would always be challenges. But the difference now was that I wasn't going to face them alone. The choice was made, but the future was still unwritten. Whether I had a chance at redemption, whether I could truly be the father Willow deserved, was something only time would tell. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right path. And that, for now, was enough.